aged. Normally, I do the darker ones, like the doubles and quads. I think I've had like some West Mall I've aged a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find it to be? Did you have it before, Ed? Before you aged it or not?
No, I had gone to an absolutely amazing bottle shop. I'll make it my background again because it's that cool. And picked out a selection, picked out a 6-pack of various. So, a couple West Lettern and 4 other beers from around Belgium that don't travel.
Right.
I'm always disappointed when I seek out beer and then I find that it actually travels. Like I'd rather like if I wander into some bottle shop, I basically tell them what can I only get in this region, if I can be that tight about it. We found an absolutely fantastic bottle shop in Torino, in Italy. And I was saying earlier before everybody had joined that you don't think of Italy as beer culture, but they are. They're really coming. It just doesn't export. And they have such a tradition of brewing when it comes to wine that brewing beer isn't difficult. Like and they're doing a fantastic job with some amazing styles.
I drank a lot of wine in Italy on the honeymoon.
Beer?
Or beer and wine.
Drink a lot of
beer.
both.
A lot of good craft beer, especially in Rome there. But
yeah, Rome has some really great beer bars.
throughout the country. Good thing you're recording it, Phil.
We'll blank you out, okay?
What do you do? You had a good bottle, but I didn't see what it was though.
Oh, it's the Trooper Red and Black.
Oh yeah, nice.
Order.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's got Iron Maiden on it. I had to have it.
Right on.
So that was what, 2018? That one? Order? Yeah. So it tastes like exactly the same as it did before. Go figure.
Really? 2 years old?
Yeah, tastes exactly the same. No difference.
Oh shit.
It's kind of like like a boozy back end to it.
Do you have a list of what sellers well versus what doesn't sell her well? Like stouts, porters sell her well, others don't.
Just by like kind of rule of thumb is sours, just higher ABV beers aside from pilsners, lagers, or IPAs like we were talking about, because like you said earlier, the hop end, they'll just drop right out on it, right? So
this was canned 3 hours ago.
Well, how many months was
and
it
will
aged
not
in a
be
barrel?
Not going in the stuff.
So one of the side effects of every time I travel bringing back 6-packs of whatever, not a 6 of something, but a random 6 assortment from whatever bottle shop I can find, is occasionally we crack into one that's found its way to the back of the closet or the fold room or the fridge for a while. And we cracked into one time and checked it into Untapped and got a note from the brewer saying that you've aged it very well. We haven't made that beer in a couple of years. And it was wonderful. It was a very, very good beer when we had it. The type that it's a shame I couldn't have brought 6 back with me. But any time we're in the Netherlands or Belgium or Luxembourg, well, Europe generally, find a bottle shop and try and get as many of the least traveled beers as I can get out of it.
I have never been to Europe.
Oh, I don't even know where to start.
One day.
Yeah.
A lot of beer there.
Oh yeah. Now one thing that was really surprising I got used to it, but Germany is fantastic for beer, but not like you would think it would be. A typical German town, a typical German bar is going to have 6 beers, and that's it. They're going to be local and they're going to be fantastic, but there'll be Pilsner, there'll be a wheat, a Dunkel, probably a big market beer of some sort, and they might round it out. There might be a non-alcoholic, there might be some other stuff, but their beer is so very regional, and you're going to find that the draft taps pretty well anywhere you roll that isn't craft beer in Germany is just a small stable of locals.
I found that in the UK too. Like they tend to lean really heavy towards super hyper local with cider and beer. Like they're like, why go for the big guys when there's like a billion awesome little places around? And you go like a few miles down the road and you can't get the beer you had at the last bar, which is really cool. But also kind of sucks. So.
Yep.
Rob, what's your favorite part of Europe for beer?
Who?
Brussels, in around Brussels, like that's where we
Seine
usually,
Valley.
yeah, the Seine Valley
Lambics.
is pretty much where we go. The same core, like hang out in Brussels, go to Cantillon, do a loop around through, visit any lambic brewery producers that we can. Their hours are really weird, so we like like some places are only open Saturday from like 9:30 to 11:30, and then like they take an hour off and they're open for an hour in the afternoon.
But they're also 3 hours away, and the next closest brewery that we want to go to is only open Thursdays from 4 until 6.
Yeah. So it's like this weird, like, well, we're here, they're not open, so I guess we're not going there.
Yeah. So last time we went, we did start in Brussels, but then we rented a car, and we decided that we were going to try and do like as many farmhouse style breweries as we could. And so we essentially just drove along the border between Belgium and France and kind of kept looping back and forth. And we wanted to see if we could find, like, we wanted to figure out basically like what the hell is happening actually with Bière de Garde.
Yeah.
Because from like a beer judging perspective as a style, it's just an absolute shit show.
And we still don't know.
And it's still an absolute shit show because everybody's Bière de Garde is like a different color and a different flavor, and some of them are sweet and some of them are not. It's just
it's like Saison, except less commercially available, essentially.
Yeah.
I actually drank a Bière de Garde from Oberon, which is like right on the border of Belgium and France on Saturday night. Yeah, on Saturday.
I didn't drink it.
And it was lovely. But it's like I never know what to expect every time I open a bottle of Bière de Garde. I'm like, I don't know what this is going to be. But it's lovely.
Mm-hmm.
Kat, you mentioned farmhouse styles. Are they the same as the farmhouse style we do here in North America?
Yes and no. Like, yes, in as much as if we're talking about like true farmhouse style in terms of, you know, your ingredients are coming from either the site of the brewery or within very close proximity to the brewery, then yeah, like they're just very much, the farmhouse style beers in Belgium are very much like, we grew our stuff, or like, you know, Luke down the street grew our stuff, and now it's all going, and so like everything is very, like the flavors are all very distinct. It's all very terroir driven, especially because of the hops. But it's still like it's farmhouse too, in the sense that we talk about here, that most of it is mixed fermentation. So you do have like a little bit of funk on the back end, but it's not sour. And then, yeah, like, you know, Bière de Garde as a style is considered to be a farmhouse style as well. And, you know, like Rob was talking about, there's just like this massive variety in what you're actually getting. Whereas I find, for the most part, North American farmhouse, you kind of know what you're going to get into when you order it. Whereas like less so we found in Belgium and France.
It's because they're all using like family recipes and like all these things that have passed down, and so they may have their own house culture. And the one thing I would say that is different about North American farmhouse styles is often the Belgian counterpoint is not as expressive as the American version will be, in terms of they figure out how to balance, and so you don't get these sharp fruity esters, you don't get the, like, often they are bitter, but like it's just a more balanced,
harmonious,
more enjoyable
experience.
beer drinking experience, where like, I mean, North American and like Shortfinger does it all the time. We like to fucking punch you in the face with these flavors.
That's
And
that's analogous to the IPA APA voyage, isn't it? Like an English IPA resembles an American APA, but only barely. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
now, have you guys, Rob, there ever considered doing a wild yeast beer?
I have a spontaneous project that'll be released this fall potentially, which is mirrored after essentially a lambic goose blend. So it's a 3-year, 2-year, 1-year blends of spontaneous fermented barrel-aged beers.
You don't know what you get, though.
I mean, the difference is, right, like the difference is when we're talking like true lambic, we're looking at, you know, like fermenting in place surrounded by like fruit trees and by the river and where the fields are. And like we put ours on a pallet in the parking lot.
Yeah.
Parking lot beers.
Right? Like we literally made our beer in the parking lot beside the Iron Horse Trail in Kitchener. So like not quite as romantic.
But
so you're going for like nuance.
Sorry, Cam?
So you're going for nuances of used needle and meth addict? Is that what you're going
Yeah.
for?
So Rob, when Rob does them, because we do them like we let them, you know, cool overnight. And Rob sleeps at the brewery, basically on the loading dock to keep an eye on everything.
No
because
shit.
otherwise,
Awesome.
yeah, like the chance of getting needles or urine in there is like pretty high, even though we have it raised up really high.
That's a different kind of all-nighter.
That beer.
Wow.
So
I love that area, man, but it is dodgy AF. I love it though.
It is.
Yeah.
if you ever
Rob, I don't know what you're doing at night, but if there's urine and needles in the parking lot, you're not sleeping in the right place.
if you're ever in Bruges, the Half Moon Brewery, if you've not already been there, is so worth it. And I've actually they do a wild yeast. That's the reason I was wondering, is it just occurred to me among the things we brought back from Bruges was their wild yeast, and we saved that for a good long time before having it. And it was fantastic, but it did not seem like the fact that it was wild yeast made a noticeable difference. And maybe if I'd had like 1 year's versus another year's, I might have. But I mean, they're brewing right in the city. I don't know where they are exposing their beer to the world. But they are brewing smack in the middle of Bruges.
Well, and I mean, like, Cantillon's right in the middle of Brussels, and they're the only urban, true lambic producer in Belgium.
Mm-hmm.
And so, right, and same thing, like, they do spontaneous stuff too, and it's all, like, right smack in the middle of the city, and it just kind of is what it is. People make it work, right, wherever they are, but we do have this image, and traditionally it was that you had this, you know, open vat of beer fermenting in your town square that was in a tiny village surrounded by farms. But like, that's not the reality for most places anymore. It's still kind of the reality for most places in Belgium, because there's really no one living in like 80% of the country. But the breweries that we're actually getting a hold of and that we're hearing about, they're all in cities or close to cities.
Now, what's the risk of losing a batch of spontaneous fermentation?
It's so high. The risk is so high.
Very high.
And what are you losing it to? Are you losing it to bad yeasts? Are you losing it to spoiling? Or
I mean, spoiling would be either bad yeast combo, bad bacteria, you name it, oxygen exposure. Like it's a bit of a crapshoot. There's a reason why it is not a overly popular way to make beer. For one thing, the flavors are often too much for most beer drinkers, but like there's no guarantee. Like, even though I have my blend planned for fall, until it's actually done, I have no clue. I could have wasted 3 years.
Yep. There's a reason that most producers in Belgium currently making lambic and gueuze style beers are doing it inside. So they have wooden breweries, exposed rafters, even more spiders than we do, but they've got their local microbes and their yeast and bacteria living in the space. And so when they are doing open fermentation, there's actually like there's no control over open fermentation, but there's a little bit more predictability that way.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're just throwing it outside, like it's whatever happens to be there, which is why in Ontario, you'll often see breweries that are looking to do open ferment going into orchards or vineyards. Because again, there's like a little bit less risk of like, who the hell knows what ending up in. But basically anytime you put a beer outside to ferment, in the open, like it could be anything that gets in there.
Now, how different? So sorry, I cut somebody off there. I want to hear whoever was talking, but I was wondering, would a cider be less risky? Because I mean, cider and open fermentation are also pretty common, aren't they? But I think I cut somebody off. Somebody else, go ahead.
Oh, I was just asking, when they do the open ferment in like orchards and vineyards, is there any risk of like pesticide drift, or do they just time it right so that they're not there when they're spraying? Would that influence the beer?
Yeah, so that for the most part, I mean, there definitely is risk of pesticide drift depending on when you're doing it. For the most part, because you want the beer to cool at like a fairly predictable rate. So it's not something that you're going to be doing in the middle of growing season when pesticides are going to be at their peak. It's too hot.
Okay.
So it tends to be that like by the time when you're doing it, either before or after, it tends to be like cold enough that really like apples are not actually in season, grapes are not in season, pesticides aren't really in the equation at that point. But it's definitely something to be aware of for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If I can add to that, the whole concept of like organic status and whatnot, people don't understand that organic status isn't like 100% certified organic. It's like 96% certified organic, because you have your crop growing, but the farmer 3 fields away may be growing something and using pesticides. You can't control the wind, so you can never guarantee that something is 100% pesticide free or organic or anything like that. It's to the best of your capabilities or the environment. So that's something to add into the whole concept of wild fermentation too, right? You can't fully control what's going to happen. You might have pesticides enter, but even, you know, like you said, when they're spraying or whatever, it's going to be offset from when you're fermenting. But
I have a question as well, but Ed, do you want to go back to yours first? You think the cider is?
I was just wondering if cider is more stable for for wild fermentation, or if it's equally risky.
So cider's more stable for most things because there's only one ingredient. So there's just like less risk in a lot of ways. But I mean, you're still dealing with, you know, ambient yeast and bacteria. So the possibility of getting something gross in there is still super high.
Cider is much more shelf stable when you compare it to beer. You guys know Rebel cider?
Yep.
I assume to a certain extent most people do. He is 100% spontaneous fermented. That being said, like if you taste his ciders, for the most part, they're actually very approachable. They're not like crazy outrageous flavors. Like sometimes he has very sour, like they do have a lot of fruit notes and whatnot, but he has got a spontaneous culture in-house that survives very well with a lot of ease comparatively to what it would take to do that for beer. And this comes down to cider as a liquid being much more shelf stable, not being affected by oxygen in the same way. Like there's a ton of stuff going on there that like they have a leg up on, and also simple sugars, easily fermentable, do not have the same complexity that beer sugars and breakdown need.
My question was basically for you guys. I guess a short finger again. Seems to be a short finger kind of night. I'm down with that. You've mentioned Cantillon, so have you, Ed. I think other people probably are familiar with it. If you're not, that's the brewery in Belgium that still follows the, what is it, 200, how old is the brewery? 200 years old? 250? It's old anyway. Anyway, it's got a lot of wood there. It's got a lot, it looks like the base of the aging area looks basically like almost like a wine cellar as far as the number of casks they have going on there. And you talked, Kat, about how they have their own in-house yeast and stuff. They can kind of rely on that when they open up their louvers in March or April, whatever. They still have a pretty good chance of getting their own yeast to infect their beer. With where you guys are and the amount of, I guess, you're more in an industrial area. As sort of the building is a lot of metal, I'm guessing, not a whole lot of wood comparatively. You have some barrels around, obviously, but I mean, you don't have the amount of, I'm guessing, yeast potential growth area that other breweries have. Are you looking to try and get like a house kind of morphed yeast? Is that something that you think you can do? A, and if so, B, how long do you think that would take to get like a sustainable yeast in your brewery?
To me? Are you kidding me?
Take it away, Kat. Hey, Kat, don't give me everything for next week.
Oh, this is not my area.
So if you have drank Lando from us at any point, that is essentially a continuous culture of our house yeast, which started as a commercial pitch, which I blended with multiple strains of bacteria and yeast, including Saccharomyces, which is your basic strain that most beers are fermented with, Brettanomyces, then bacteria like Lactobacillus and Pediococcus, different variants within. And then I control that house culture using hops and blending to then make it do sort of what I want usually most of the time.
But it's not the same thing in terms of like it doesn't just like live in the rafters. We are in a metal building, for sure. So we won't have like it's not going to be the same thing that you get at like Dre Fontaine and Cantillon, where they have these massive wooden rooms and they do all of their fermentation open in those rooms. Yeah. When Rob's looking at doing wild, we're doing it outside. When we're doing, you know, like our house culture, which we do have like a pretty identifiable house culture at this point. It's from a yeast and bacteria blend that Rob is maintaining and feeding. And
what do you maintain that in?
So in the beer itself.
Okay.
So I harvest and reuse the yeast, build it back up. So like I brewed Lando on Saturday, and I'd harvested a bunch of barrels previously, and I took slurry from those barrels, reactivate it, try to build it up, and then pitched it with fresh, blended it back together for the next fermentation.
And reactivating it basically just means like sticking it in an Erlenmeyer flask with sugary water so that it has something to eat and it wakes back up and reactivates, and then you can pitch it again.
Yeah. So it is different from a spontaneous fermentation, but what I'm trying to do is loosely based off of it. I pretty much call Lando is essentially a bastard. Like if you get a neutral blend of it, of like a goose, that's essentially what I'm going for.
Yeah. Would you say that process is more akin to like a sourdough, where you're maintaining a culture and using it batch over batch?
Yeah, and that's not just for ours. Like that's not just for like our yeast and bacteria house culture. That's what most commercial breweries end up doing, whether they're using clean yeast or mixed fermentation, simply because it's really expensive to be buying a new pitch every time you need to brew. And so it is really common to be, you know, cropping and reusing your yeast. And so most breweries, you know, will start with a commercial pitch from somebody like Escarpment, and then over time with reuse, it does kind of take on their house characteristic a little bit more. But yeah, it's maintained like a sourdough.
But I will not be like putting wood around the brewery and spraying yeast all over the place. I do clean beer as well. So that is just like bad. That's a bad idea. That's how you're going to get like rampant infections through everything. So spontaneous is fun and it's a great project, but it's tough to do when you're trying to straddle two worlds of like clean and mixed fermentation beer.
How big of a batch would you risk the spontaneous?
I mean, we do 4 hex, so essentially 400 liter batches every time.
Mm-hmm. So you'd risk.
Yeah, we have such a small system that like our system is smaller than a lot of breweries' pilot systems. So it's just the same size regardless.
Yeah. Okay.
We got a couple questions. If anybody else has some, please jump on it. If not, I'll wait for 5 seconds.
All right, I'll
I have
jump.
a question because I just missed out on some of that. Sorry.
Oh, I have a question. This ties into both the environment. You guys have traveled through Europe, and you're talking about the experience of the breweries that you go to. And the question I have is, how much does environment influence experience, both physical environment and brewing environment?
I have a story about this, but I want to leave it to people who are going to talk about good beer first, because I'm going to tell my bad beer story.
So my favorite, generally I think environment's really important, but I will also jump in to say that my favorite beer in the world is Girardin Black Label. And Girardin is a brewery in Belgium that's open a few hours a week. And you drive up to their gate. It's a family-owned farm that their brewery is their side project. And you drive up to the gate, and their like son or nephew or grandson, somebody meets you. They take you to a trophy case that has one bottle of everything they offer, the glasses they sell, and the awards they've won. You point at what you want, and then he goes into the brewery to get it for you. There's no tasting room. You can't go in. There's a giant no pictures allowed sign. They don't want to talk to you. They want you to get your shit and get the hell out. But so like experience-wise, terrible experience, but also like oddly charming. And like 300 meters down the road, there's just a random picnic table on a corner. So we just went and drank on a picnic table, and it was delightful.
Can you paste that in the chat, like whoever that, what brewery that is, because I want to put that on my list. I will go, like West Leonard is on my list, and the first time I was working in Europe, I called the beer line every day for the time it was open and could not get through to make my order to go get my case of West Leonard.
Right. So we didn't try, when we were there last time, we didn't try and get the case because A, we knew we weren't going to get it home, and B, we don't need a case of that much of anything. But we wanted to go, so we just kind of like showed up. And honestly, it was one of the places that I was the most.
It was like drinking in a cafeteria.
It was one of the places I was most disappointed with, which was shocking to me because I have this image of them on a pedestal as a Trappist brewery, and then we got there and it's like this massive, clearly multi-million-dollar complex that's essentially a cafeteria. And it's like an assembly line of like, get in, drink your beer, and get out. And for like, I was really disappointed. And it was the place that I was most excited to visit.
I wasn't most excited to visit.
That removes a lot of the mythology, and that disappoints me greatly.
Sorry.
The beers are fantastic. The beers, but
they did a large expansion.
They did a massive expansion. Like we were there 2 summers ago, and they had just finished their expansion, and it was huge.
So for me, this was 10 years ago, before their expansion, before they had the beer in the LCBO and around the world to try and raise money, etc. So it probably would have been closer to the myth at the time.
Absolutely. And now it's like, post beer in the LCBO to raise money. This is what they use the money for. And now it's just kind of weird. Like it definitely ruins the mythology a bit.
It's a shame. I still have my beer and locality story, but I want to let other people go. I
just want a quick comment. I did an aged double tasting a couple years ago, and we had West Leonard as one of the options, just because we wanted to see how much better it was than everybody else. And it was a very good product, but nowhere worth 10 times the amount of other Trappist producers. I even compared it to I had a 5-year-old bottle or 4-year-old bottle of Dead Now from Block 3, which was almost as good as the West Leonard, especially for charging $35 a bottle, whatever it is at the at bars and things. I think it's for me also a bit more hype than substance. That's all I'm going to say about that.
I think for me, the one thing about West Leonard is that they managed to be very unique. When I've had it, they are very, very good, and they are not following anybody. And I think that's what I've liked it for. But I mean, next I've got the I don't have the blonde, but I've got the other two waiting for me. And the next time I try them, I'm going to try them beside Orval and Duvel and St. Bernardus, and I'm gonna line them up, and I'm gonna see it. Like, is it that unique? Because for me, maybe the mythology went into it, but the combination of the quality, the enjoyability and the uniqueness really did it for me. But I'm really curious to see if lined up beside the other comparables, if it's that unique.
The thing that drives me crazy about that West Veteran is that they sold that recipe to St. Bernardus years ago, and it's the exact same beer.
Yep.
It's just because it's not brewed at the monastery that they sell it for that much. So you buy those two bottles and you sample them together. It should be the exact same beer.
Well, that's my intention is the next time that I open those. One, it's going to be a celebration of the end of the pandemic or something else. I don't know. And two, I'm going to line it up side by side with the comparables and see, like, because, I mean, when I've had them, I've truly liked them. The blonde wasn't worth it, though. The blonde was not worth the money. The other two were worth it to try. But anyway, I'm coming back around. So everybody who's got a beer and location story, keep going, because mine is not a good beer location. Is a fantastic location and not a good beer, but keep going.
I bought the last beer at kickoff.
Ooh, that's a sad story. That's a sad.
That's a location.
Graham, that is both an excellent and a very sad story.
I got a ride home from Bill my last night, so that was a good end for me.
Bill, I didn't know you drove people home.
My birthday party, he was hammered. He couldn't get an Uber. I was sort of heading in that direction. And if I'd known he was going to chatter all that much, I would never have done it.
He didn't stop for me to get out. He just opened the door and kicked me.
Pushed.
So this is a smoked vanilla stout. 7%. I believe it's also Belgian, given that I bought it in Belgium. And I'm really quite curious about it. Anyway, other beer location stories, because
we have a really good one.
Go for it.
When we were in Australia, I don't know how many,
2013. There's this brewery there called Murray's. It's like a country estate brewery about an hour north of Sydney.
And we rented.
One of my favorite Australian beers is from them. It's called what's it called?
Wasn't it just Murray's Pale Ale?
No, totally just drew a blank.
Oh.
I should know this. Well, now I look like an idiot. But.
We had rented this camper car, which was just a hatchback Corolla with the seats taken out so you could sleep in the back. And it was our first night on our road trip portion. So we drove to the brewery, and before we wanted to drink, we asked them, like, was there somewhere that we could camp nearby, like park our car? And they told us, you know, we would really prefer it if you just slept in our parking lot. We think it would be a lot safer. So they they left the bathrooms unlocked for us. They cooked us food right before the kitchen closed so that we would have food to last us through the night. And
brought
then
us a 6-pack of beer to drink in the car.
They came up to us and said, you know, what do you have for beer to get you through the night? And Derek had some like,
James Squire, which is like the Mill Street of Australia.
And so they said, no. And they gave us a free 6-pack. And so we like played cards all alone in their like estate.
Middle of nowhere,
and then slept in their parking lot.
Beautiful, like it was a vineyard orchard or something too.
It was an orchard.
That's fantastic. I love it. I love it. And you've reminded me of another beer story, slightly different. So I will tell two then, when it comes back around to my turn. But that's put them in the chat too, because I may never get there, but I want to have them on my list too.
Sure.
Keith, you have one?
Yeah.
Who? Me? What, a beer and location story? Oh boy. Let me think. Well, I guess probably just getting turfed out of an abbey in Belgium because we were on tour. The band was on tour, and they were like, You guys should probably leave right now. That's about the best I can come up with off the top of my head.
So
Beer.
did it make you like the brewery more or less?
Kind of more. I respected them because we've been on tour for like 3 weeks in Europe and probably stank to high heaven, and there were 9 of us. So I don't blame them. It probably had nothing to do with the way we looked or what we were doing. We probably just stank.
I guess I'll sneak my bad beer story in. My good bad beer, bad good beer, following that up. My grandmother has now passed, but her birthday parties were always at a park in northern Michigan, about 6 hours away from here. And they were August, and it would always be hot. And I would get in the car, and I would drive from here all the way up there. And I would arrive there, go into the state park, which was dry, and we would all start barbecuing. It'd be me and my couple of my uncles and my father were barbecuing, and let everybody else go into the main part of the party. And my other uncle would roll up in his 1984 Camaro, and this is not 1984, you know that, and bring his case of Busch Light. And honestly, when it's that hot and it's your grandmother's 90th birthday party and you're in a dry state park in northern Michigan, that Busch Light is the best beer you can have at that occasion. Now, I don't necessarily want to have Busch Light any other time, but for me, it's like it suited the situation so well, and that's for me like having. I'm not a fan of light sweet lagers, the Italian lagers, the Spanish lagers, things like that. Having an Estrella Dam on Las Ramblas in Barcelona, having Nastro Azzurri up on a cliff looking out over the Mediterranean Sea in Italy. Beers have their place. I don't necessarily want to be in all of those places. Like frat parties and Bud Light Lime don't work for me. But for me, beer and location go a lot together. So that's my. The other one is that I was reminded of by Derek and Naomi there with that your brewery there. Matt Cooper and I were skiing in Torino, in Turin, and we were staying in the lower village in Sestriere where the Olympics were, and we caught a mini cab bus thing up to the upper village, and we're at a small craft beer bar, and we asked for recommendations for where to go eat. We went and ate, and then missed the last mini cab bus back down. So we went back to the craft beer bar we were at, and we said, "Can you call us a cab? We just need to go down to, you know." They're like, "No, too expensive. I'll drive you. I'll just take a break. I'll drive you." And honestly, we go out to her van, and we get in her little van, and she's like, "I live right there." She drives us all the way down the mountain to where, and we did find out that it's actually shorter to walk than drive, but it's down the ski hill, which is, I mean, you've had a few beers, probably a bad idea. But in terms of hospitality, that like, it was a mother-daughter running the bar, and the daughter was like, "I'll just take a break. I'll drive them down. Don't worry, don't worry." And it was awesome. It was really, really awesome. I love that kind of hospitality.
I have a question for
one as well. Anybody? Oh, sorry.
I have a question just about your Belgian trips. To do like countryside like that, did you need to speak French or Flemish?
I speak French.
You speak French?
Yeah.
Cat.
Some of the places are fine. It sort of depends on the generation. Breweries that have sort of passed down to a younger generation, the current owners or brewers speak at least a little bit of English. But, you know, we decided we were going to go to Fantôme, and we were expecting it to be like a 10-minute in and out kind of thing. Like I had emailed Danny to say we were coming, and he's like, "Sure, I'll give you a quick tour, no big deal." But as it turns out, when we got there, he doesn't really speak English at all. And didn't expect me to speak French. And it ended up being that like we were there for 4 hours, and he took us out for lunch with his extended family. And we just talked politics while Rob sat there smiling and nodding.
I used Kat as an interpreter to go over beers with him.
But definitely, yeah, when you get out of urban areas, it is definitely helpful, depending on where you are in Belgium, to speak either French or Flemish. But even in the Flemish parts, it's pretty likely that they speak French as well.
Yeah, but if you're in Brussels, English is.
Yeah, like if you're in Brussels, if you're in Bruges, if you're in any of the cities,
we
it's
went
totally
in the spring to Belgium. I was pregnant, so I didn't get to drink anything. But I speak a little French, but I didn't need to use any French. So
yeah, absolutely. And in the cities, you really don't. Definitely. And I think in the countryside, if you're just going to everyone has basic conversational English.
Yeah.
For us, we had reached out to most of the breweries because a lot of them don't really have hours or don't have consistent hours. And so some of them kind of accommodated us as brewers to come out and check out the place kind of thing. And in that regard, because it was more of a conversation and an idea exchange, we would have been fucked at a couple of those places if at least one of us didn't speak French. But everyone has basic conversational English everywhere you go.
Okay.
Do the brewers have an air beer and beer manual that you could connect with all these people and travel from brewery to brewery?
Not really.
Not really. Yeah, no, but what we have found is that you go and you so the first time we went to Belgium, we Richard from Escarpment got us in touch with Yvonne, who owns De La Seine, and so we went and we met him, and he was the first person we met, and then he was like, oh, you need to go to this place and talk to this person and go to this place and talk to this person and tell them that I sent you. And so everyone's super hospitable, and so if you go to one place, they're gonna give you suggestions and names and contacts. But there's really
it's more of a network of I met you and I get
and so when we travel now, we actually, and this is I know a lot of people's hell, we don't make an itinerary at all. We make a list of places that we intend to try and get to, and we get to the ones we go to, and we have no order specifically.
Some brewery stops will be 50 minutes. I hate the beer and I think the servers are jerks, and other ones will be there for 8 hours because they
because it was amazing,
the whole place, and we met the owner and they
but you just
wanted to show us around.
You just never know, right? So we don't really make plans anymore.
So you could do instead of LinkedIn, you could do DrinkIn and connect all these brewer operators.
Try.
You could absolutely. You know what? That might be your moneymaker.
Yeah.
No. You might have fun doing it. You could probably have fun doing it. You're not going to make money doing it.
No,
the math doesn't work. The math just doesn't work.
The money later.
Yeah. The whole target is to be acquired when you do something like that. You're not looking for, and then I'm delving off of beer into practicality on things like this. You're not looking to make money doing what you're doing. You're looking to make money by being acquired by one of the big players who has money to spend.
Oh, there is an exit strategy. Untapped, DrinkIn.
Yeah. Untapped got bought. And I actually taught a course using a textbook that he wrote, and it was full of technical typos, and I'm quite bitter. It actually was a terrible technical resource. And so I briefly had a project running, and the only people to use it for any length of time, which was the entire duration, and quite successfully, was AskCast. And I'm going to retire it because now that Kickoff's not going to be using it, there's going to be no need for AskCast. I figured if I made beer money, I'd be doing okay, and I didn't make beer money. It did give me slightly special privileges at Kickoff to combine two halves into a whole occasionally. Well, frequently, but other than that.
Yeah.
Oh, I had that deal too. Hey, Bill?
But
I don't recall what you're talking about, gentlemen.
So I did the math though, and if you are trying to do something where you're trying to sell to somebody at $10 a month, let's say, it is a job, and my day job pays me better, whether it is teaching or whether it is automation or things like that. And people have these dreams of writing apps. it's a slog. You're not gonna like maybe you'll be Flappy Bird, or maybe you'll be one of these things that just a huge success. But most things you have to like take a serious hit, take a serious risk. You'll make less money and have less time than being good at what you do, doing what you know how to do, paid for by somebody else. As depressing as that is.
I have
That's a good segue.
conclusion.
Yeah, that's a good segue for me to like share a story. I literally write apps for a living, so that's interesting. Okay, anyways, this is not about an app at all, but this is the first one I've been to. I'll introduce myself. I'm Chirag. I live in Toronto, as you can see, a bunch of condos across the street. Not a lot of room to age beers, so I buy beers and I drink beers. I'm drinking Shackland's beer. It's called Eco Knitting. It's good. It's a quadruple, 10%, packs a punch. It ages well as well, or so I've been told. As I said, never tried it. One quick story. I think a lot of the stories have kind of inspired me, but the hardest thing is to go on a road trip and try beer, because you're either drinking or you're driving.
I mean,
yeah, it's hard, right? Like, and for me, it's not, because I don't have a license. I don't drive. So my brother and I took a road trip. As I said, I've never been to Europe. This is America. So my brother and I took a road trip up the West Coast. We started in San Jose and we drove all the way up to Vancouver. It took us about 12 days, and we hit like a bunch of different cities along the way, a few national parks. My favorite beer city is Bend, Oregon. It's like criminally underrated for beer. People give Seattle and Portland a very good reputation for beer, but Bend is crazy good for beer.
Okay.
But my favorite brewery was a brewery called Cascade in Portland, and they are known for their sours. Their aged sours, their barrel aged sours. I had a couple of their beers at Cask Fest in Toronto, I think 2 years ago, something like that. And I didn't know that I'd had their beer before I went to this brewery. My brother was an angel. He drove everywhere, took me to breweries. It was great. He doesn't drink, he drives. I don't drive, I drink. It was great.
So I do have to say Chirag, how you say it?
Chirag, yeah.
Chirag? Okay. So in Europe, you don't need to drive. Transit is fantastic. Trains are fantastic. Bicycling is fantastic. You can drink on the train. You can drink in public. So we have our tradition on going to visit Luxembourg. I worked for a company headquartered out of Luxembourg for about 5 years. I still go back because it's a fairy tale. We arrive, and you've taken an overnight flight, so you need to stay awake. You arrive around lunchtime. You go to a market, you get a packaged lunch of some sort, sandwiches, whatever. You get a couple of beers off the shelf. You go sit on a bench, and you have a wonderful Trappist beer, like a Orval is my go-to. Sit on a bench, have your lunch, push through the day, and then your first days are right off because you flew overnight in economy and you slept like this, but through our trips, we would bike 60 kilometers a day, 30 to 60 kilometers a day. You stop for lunch. You have a true Radler where they pour Pilsner and lemonade. And it's fantastic. End of the day, you stop at a market before you go back to where you're staying, because you're staying out in the countryside because it's less expensive, or your friends own the condo and it's free, which is fantastic. But you get some food and you get a couple beers, and you've been biking all day or doing whatever, and you have your beers on the train because you can. But on top of that, maybe you go and you stop along the way at a craft beer bar, you have a beer, you go to a brewery, it integrates because you can get around without driving. And because it is built around getting around without driving, it never feels like you are taking transit between your destinations. You are just enjoying your day, and it makes the integration of your meals, your beverages, whatever you choose to do, just seems so much more natural. So
100%.
if you're gonna do Europe, I track down Bill, connect with me. We'll plan it. We will and we won't plan it like you do X, Y, Z. We'll just do it like Rob and Kat. You make a list. What you get to, you get to. What you don't get to, you don't get to.
You got it. Yeah, and I agree. I think it combines two of my favorite things. Like, I love public transit. It's one of my favorite things. No matter what city I go to, I have a collection of passes or whatever you call it, like transit passes. Love that. So I take public transit in every new city I go to.
Nice. Now I have
and beer. Beer is beer.
I have to disappoint you. If you go to Luxembourg, as of March this year, the entire country transit is free. So you can't get a pass anymore. All you got to do is go and get on the train. Now, it's not a big country, but it does take about an hour and a half, 2 hours to cross by train. The trains, the buses, the light rail, all the funicular, all free as of March this year. And already it was €4 a day for a day pass for the entire country. So we were staying in the north, about an hour train ride out of Luxembourg City. We would buy our €4 a day pass and use it to go across the entire country, literally the entire country. Again, not a big country, but big enough that an hour by high speed, so not super high speed, but by fast train, an hour to get into Luxembourg City. It takes 2 hours to get into Toronto by train, and that costs you $15, $16 at the cheapest. So I'm excited for you. You will love it. You will love it. I'm so excited. Anytime somebody takes a first trip to Europe, I'm really excited.
Hey, sure.
After this settles down, yeah.
Before you go to Europe, can I ask you more about Cascade?
100%. Yeah, I was gonna say. I think my favorite beer at Cascade. I opened my own tap because that's how I keep track. Was a beer called Sang Royal, something like that. And it was like 9.4%, and it was it packed a punch. It's so good.
What did you find? Like you're saying, so you mentioned that was your favorite of all the breweries that you visited when you were in Oregon, and so I guess to Graham's question, what was your experience like in the tap room, and what was the experience at Cascade like, and how did that relate to, or did it impact like your enjoyment of the beer?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think I'll talk about three distinct experiences in Oregon on that trip, right? Let me start with, I don't remember what the breweries were called, but there was a brewery that we went to. I think it's called Madras Brewing Company, Madras, like the city in India, but it's pronounced differently. And we go in, and the goal for going to that place was it had good reviews on Google, and we wanted to get lunch. And I'm like, okay, it's a brewing company. I'm gonna go get some beer. We get in there. There's no one up front. There's no one in the restaurant. There's no one in the tasting room. No one. We get in there. We press the bell. Someone shows up. I order a flight, and my brother orders food. We get lunch. No one else there. No one explains what the beers are. Desolate. The beer was actually good though. Like, the beer was good. So that's very surprising. And the food was very good too. But there was no one there. It was just afternoon on a Tuesday, so it's kind of understandable, but whatever. This was a road trip. We were drinking during the week. It's fine. Then there was a brewery just outside of Seattle in Washington. This is where the Boeing hotspot, and it was like 6 p.m. And we get to this place, and it's packed, like jam-packed full of people. No event, no nothing. It was just like after work busyness, and it was the exact same experience where very disinterested servers, and well, mostly because they were super busy, but like the beer was amazing again. The people around us were all cliques. They were talking to each other, blah blah blah, whatever. It's fine. Cascade, It was in a suburb, but it was in a busy commercial part of a suburb. We go in, there's like 6 other people. The guy actually comes up to us and asks us if we've been there before, and explains that they do barrel-aged sour beers, and if we know what barrel-aged sour beers are, which I really appreciated. My brother doesn't drink, so he didn't know, and like I hadn't been there before, so like he gave like a rundown of barrel-aged sour beers, and he asked us what we wanted. I'm like, I'm gonna get a flight. You decide what's on a flight. That's usually what I do, and all the options that he gave like on the flight was just amazing.
Yeah, it can really make a difference. Not in terms of the quality of the beer, either beer is good or it's bad, but in terms of what you remember about a place, I think environment is really important, for sure.
You reminded me of Kansas City, and this behind me is Hopcat. It's actually a franchise out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, I think, and they have 130 taps. Their upstairs was the local 30, and it was 30 local craft beers. And again, the people were fantastic. The beer was fantastic. The location was fantastic. And imagine being here where there's a rooftop patio with roll-up doors, 30 craft beer that continuously rotate, and just being walking distance from bars, restaurants, the hotel you're staying in. Have you been there, Kat? I see you smiling.
I haven't. No, I'm just hitting Rob because he's yawning.
Sorry. I have been to Hopcat.
Yep.
Great.
Which one?
Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, and one other.
I'm not usually a franchise fan, but they did a really good job. Like, you didn't feel like it was a Mick beer place. Or Beer Town, for that matter. Sorry, I don't mean to... I don't know how Beer Town can have so many taps and so little variety, but anyway, I won't say anything more.
I used to work for Choco, man. I get you. I get you.
Related to how much money someone's willing to give them to go in the menu.
Oh, yeah. I got one beer story.
Oddly enough, they don't really have our beer.
Never asked for
Weird.
it. I don't know.
It's surprisingly hard to get your beer on tap, though, guys. I've been trying for over a year myself. Just saying.
We I mean, now that Kickoff's closed, we have room to add another account.
Oh no, sloppy seconds. Okay, that's the Brad has for you. Great. Thanks for that.
We don't have to tell the story that way, though.
You're right.
No, literally, it's just that our goal has always been to sell as much out of our front door as possible because we make the most money that way. And our batch size is so small that we do feel kind of shitty about it, but I feel like we're one of the only breweries that's not like actively seeking accounts, and it's only because we can't routinely keep people stocked. And it sucks when you have an account that you care about and they ask for beer and you're like, I'm sorry, we have nothing, and we might not for 2 months, and that's a really shitty feeling. So we just try not to have a lot of accounts so that the ones we do have we can actually be attentive to.
Yeah. Beautiful. Bless you.
So there was a question coming from the chat. Somebody has a question. Let him know when he can ask it. I'm not the host. Bill is technically the host, but I was a part of this.
If you want to ask your question, come on, join us.
Okay, can you hear me okay there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, for some reason I can't get my video to show other than this background, the painting of mine, but...
I quite appreciate the background. That's yours? Nice. I like it.
Yeah, at the Scotia Center last year, when things were normal.
Yeah.
So, no, I've never been to Europe or even the U.S. for that matter, but I recognize, obviously Europe's the holy grail, Germany, Belgium for beer. I'd love to go there for beer one day. And then the U.S. has a lot of crazy, interesting stuff going on, like Chirag's Head in Oregon. I was going to say the Deschutes Brewery, I think, is one I've seen on tap, some of their beers on tap at Arabella, at least. So Yeah, I didn't know those.
I'm the beer people.
Yeah, so I didn't know it was specifically Bend, Oregon, but I looked it up, and I was just curious. So I remember a couple of years ago, at least a couple of years ago, reading about the craft beer scene in Japan, and then just in some Asian countries. Apparently, there's quite a bit going on there too, and some interesting stuff. So, has anybody been to any craft brewery in specifically Japan, or even in India or anywhere else? Like Graham, you've been to India, right?
Yeah.
Did they have any of that at the time?
Macro breweries. There.
Just macro, okay.
Yeah.
It's too bad. What's his name there? Denham, Steve Denham. Too bad he's not on tonight because he's in Japan right now, right, as we speak. So
He's probably working right now.
Oh, true. Yeah, yeah.
Or wait a second. He's probably. I mean, we're 9 o'clock at night. He's probably just getting up to go to work, or to
he'd
virtually
be
go to work.
early in his day. But,
Yeah. Yep.
So yeah, it'd be interesting to find out.
Well, I mean, I do have to, like, the one thing I can say, not about Asia, but just generally, I think that there are craft beers that don't travel. 10 a.m. So Denham started work. He can't drink yet. The one thing I would say is there are countries where you think they don't have craft beer because they're, I mean, the one specific for me, Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Nastro Azzurri, Peretti, Maroni, light, sweet, almost cloyingly sweet Italian, Mediterranean lagers, not interesting. Well, when you're there, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't travel. And there's a lot of very, very good beer. I can't speak for Asia, but I would hope that there are things there that we don't get here.
Beer in India sucks so bad.
Okay.
Oh my God. It is not good. It's all macro. I think it's just because I haven't traveled enough in India.
Wait a minute.
Interesting though,
Chirag, what about the honeybee?
I think it's just because I haven't traveled enough, but like everything that I've had there is just.
That's interesting because I know Scotch whiskey, you can't call it Scotch, but that style in India is there's some good stuff, right? Remember at Kickoff was the first time I found out that India made some good whiskey that was basically like a Scotch whiskey. Bill, do you remember the name?
Amruth has the right to use the word Scotch whiskey because they're like the guys out in Cape Breton, Glen Breton.
Yeah.
They were given permission by the Scotch Distillery Association of Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
And
the guys
Japan
in
makes,
Japan.
Japan makes some fantastic whiskeys too.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that somewhere in India there has to be craft brewing. I can't imagine there isn't. I think the issue is it doesn't travel. I have never seen an Italian beer here that is not Peretti or Maroni. Peroni.
To the contrary, I had one maybe 3 years ago. I wish I remembered the name. It was a beer from Italy that was not one of those big brew ones, and it had basil in it. It was outstanding. It really impressed me. I thought I'm going to take a chance on this. It was in a bottle, like 500 ml, and I didn't expect much from it, but it was really nice.
And that was here?
Yeah, here from the LCBO. And I wish I remembered the name, and it was a one-off, I saw it at the LCBO uptown Waterloo, grabbed it. Wish I had bought more because, it was just an outstanding beer. And I think it was Italian craft brewery, brewed beer, but it's very rare.
I was really blown away when we found a bottle shop in Italy, in Turin, that not just a variety of craft beers, a variety of styles and different breweries who focused on different styles. And not surprising when you think of countries that have brewing cultures, countries that make a lot of wine. I wonder about South America, like Argentina and things like that, where they make a lot of wine. Do they make a lot of beer too? And are they exploring different styles? Are they exploring different things?
Yeah.
Brazil's got a number of breweries, I know. They come up to some of the beer fests once in a while.
I was going to say there was an Italian brewery at the Collective Arts Festival last summer, but I don't remember which one.
Yeah, I'm drawing a blank too.
Mm-hmm.
I think refrigeration has a big factor in the success or failure of craft brew in some of these southern climates. What do you think, Mr. Brewmaster and Mrs. Brewmasters?
I can't speak to that. I'm not a brewer, but I do know that lagers need consistent temperature and ales are more forgiving. That's all I know.
And I wonder.
Oh, go
Sorry
ahead.
for cutting in. No, I was gonna say, adding to Graham, is like, I wonder how much cuisine plays into that as well. Like how different kinds of alcohol actually export well, in addition to food.
I heard that there was Kingfisher was the go-to brand for me, but there's another brand there that if you tip it upside down, the chemicals react and they separate in the beer. Something in the beer to stabilize it for unrefrigeration.
Yeah, I remember actually at Kickoff having a Kingfisher, and I noticed on the ingredients list it was like it was glycol or some other type of alcohol other than ethanol, and it was there specifically for that because you know the refrigeration isn't as commonly available in India, so it was a stabilizer like that or preservative. So I'm trying to Google it right now. Does anybody know?
The thing I find amazing, Remy, when you think about it though, is IPA is India Pale Ale. It was a beer brewed in the UK to be sent via boat in the hold to Brits in India. And I wonder, and I obviously do not know anything about beer culture in India. I wonder how that influenced beer in India. I see, Shirag. Go ahead.
I have no idea either. To be honest, I was like not born in India. My parents are Indian, but like the fact that there's multiple states in the country that are dry, and it's just not something that, like, I can't tell my parents that I drink, so it's just not great.
We'll be sure to send them a recording.
You see, there's 9 of us here now that you're going to have to deal with.
I think, well, what you guys were talking about, like, with beer traveling, is that not a pasteurization issue? Rob and Kat, would you know more about that? But
on the style, I mean, none of the beer that we buy when we're traveling is really pasteurized, but we're buying mostly mixed from stuff, right?
Yeah. That being said, there are some breweries that on large scale do mixed fermentation with pasteurization. Mm-hmm. New Belgium being one, their Lips of Faith series is pasteurized. From what I know, I don't know if that's changed, but it's more of a brewery releases beer. This is the way we want it to taste for you. And you have X amount of time to drink it while it's still fresh. And even in that case, it could be longer, but it's not going to develop the same way. But the majority of these beers, I would say, are non-pasteurized. It for traveling is...
Yeah, but I mean, depending on the style you like, right? Like if you want to bring home a ton of pale ales and IPAs, they're always better fresh. But yeah, they're going to be more stable if they're pasteurized, right? Like that's the whole point of doing it. And so...
And if you deal with someone like the LCBO, you do not know if you're going to get cold space. The LCBO just throws your shit on the shelf. Sits warm for 4 months before it even gets to a customer. Maybe that's a stretch, but you know what I mean. Like, you have no idea.
Pretty close.
Hey, man, I got a can of Modern Times from the LCBO that was over a year old.
Which store was that?
You get a can of the doctor just wants to fight or something that was brewed 3 days before. I don't know how they get it so fast through their system.
Right.
Which
yeah, it just depends.
Spectrum.
Because I work at the LCBO.
All that spills into
so
like if you're direct. Well, you can't be direct delivery anymore. The liquor store can't. But that's a whole other issue that spills into all of this as to how they get delivered to, and everything's sitting on skids in the back of a liquor store. They're not that big because they look pretty when you walk in. They're that big because they have a whole bunch of shelf space in the back that hopefully you get rotated in until it gets onto the shelf or in the fridge.
So Graham, remember your thought? Remy, you started saying you worked at an LCBO?
No, I work for the LCBO, a weekend job. So I'm just curious, Kat, what store that was at, because that's not supposed to happen. So somebody was slacking off.
It was Northfield.
Northfield, okay, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. There's, yeah, I've heard some things. I've had bad experiences actually shopping there myself. Now, yeah. And they're a big store. They're also a huge store, so it would be easier for something to not be rotated like that.
That's it, right? Like things get lost, and it's not like it's ill intention, but the reality is it's a massive system, and they have beer coming in all the time, and some of it just gets.
Yeah. No, come to our store. I know
The case gets lost in the back sometimes.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, the guy Jason who used to work at Northfield now works down at Ottawa and River, and he takes care of down there. So.
Nice.
Okay.
Remy, what store are you at?
Victoria and Edna, so tiny little store, but we get beer deliveries. The breweries bring it straight to us in the back. We have a different system than most stores because we have a basement, and so yeah. And with our craft beers and that, we tend to rotate quite a bit. Like yeah, we're always changing. A lot of people actually come to our store. A lot of customers come to ours specifically because of our craft beer selection. Even though it's not as big as say uptown, we do have quite a few, and like I said, we're always rotating. So you'll find some new stuff all the time. We always have some IPAs, New England hazy IPAs, sours. A lot of sours. They're very popular at our store. So even though you might not find the same exact same one you're looking for every week, we'll have something right up that alley. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie to you. Standing in line to go to the LCBO is not something that I'm super into. So far in this pandemic, the only thing that I've stood in line for is donuts at Breadnick's, and I don't regret my choice.
Nice.
Why would you stand in line with the LCBO? That's a terrible idea.
Well, no, it's just because we're talking about Remy's store. And last time I drove past
Victoria,
and Edna, there was a huge line.
Oh yeah, around the building.
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, yeah, we got a lot of regulars, and then it depends what time of day. So we had reduced our hours, and then recently the LCBO opened up back until 9 p.m. Right, we're still closed on Monday, and Sunday we're open till 6, but Monday through Saturday we're open till 9. So the best time right now is after 6 p.m. because a lot of people don't know we're open that late. So the word hasn't gotten around. I don't think Google has updated the hours correctly. So yeah, if you go during the afternoon, or even on a Sunday, like 11 a.m. we have a lineup before we open up all the alcoholics. So but other than that,
having beer shipped, like whenever I want beer that isn't short finger, obviously
we've been doing a lot of ordering.
I've been doing Counterpoint pickup because we live literally a walking distance from Counterpoint. And
that's great.
I mean, I should do pickup from you guys too, because you guys aren't that far away either. But I can make an order from Counterpoint and get an email, like an order to be picked up in half an hour. And I get an email in 5 minutes, your order is picked. It's ready. And I roll over there, and in literally 15 minutes, I've got whatever they've got. Now they're selling out everything though. Like everything they do, they sell out. So.
Well, yeah, their system's smaller than ours, right? Like they're hard pressed to keep beer.
They're basically a large homebrew operation.
Yes.
Yeah, but they're fantastic guys.
Yes.
I have a couple of announcements I'm going to make, and then I'm going to shut the recording off. Okay.
Okay.
So join us next week. Kat is going to be joining us. We're going to discuss her
probably really sick of me already.
The craft beer industry with me. Please check out Ren's. Although she wasn't here this week, please check out her site, beer.diversity. And take a look at the announcement that we put up on her behalf on the kickoffannex.ca. And so with all of that in my announcement, I am going to shut off the recording, and then we can continue to talk if you want.
We get real.
It's all been bullshit till now.
That's on the recording.
Oh, it's better you get